Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the show where you can ask all your questions without any fear of getting judged or roasted or debated or anything of that nature. Things are really weird in politics these days, particularly with all of the misinformation and propaganda that's running around out there. So, this is where you can ask all your questions about what's actually going on, what's a reputable source, and what we can do about things going forward. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. I am not here to fight or harass or bully anybody. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. So, put a good faith question in the chat and you will get a good faith answer in response. I don't believe in debates. I do not believe that they are productive. Sure, they're entertaining if you really want to look at politics like a team sport as opposed to, policies that actually affect people's lives. What's up, Yolanda? Great to see you again. But that is not what we do here. Here, we do good faith answers to all your good faith questions. We do actual substantive discussions about politics and answer all of your questions, be they simple or complicated. I don't believe in making fun of people for not being informed or trying to learn new things. And I'm also not here to get into fights with Republicans or getting into debates or shouting matches. This is not a show for people getting called stupid or uninformed or anything like that. Rachel says, "Hi, Jared. Which city do you think ICE will attack next?" I have no idea, Rachel. That's the kind of political prediction that I really don't truck with. I will say that I don't know if they're done in Minnesota. I think that that's probably where they're going to be focusing their efforts for the foreseeable future. But yeah, I would look at other mid-sized progressive cities. I think that the value of Minnesota to Minneapolis to a lot of to ICE and to Trump is because it is a smaller city, and so their effective military force is going to be felt even stronger. So yeah, I don't think like New York, Chicago, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I think it's probably going to be something like Madison or something like that. Portland, Seattle, potentially. I don't know. All right, excellent first question, Rachel. Thank you so much for being here. And to everybody else watching, welcome. We are here to answer all of your questions about politics. What's up, Willie? Great to see you again. So yeah, any questions about politics, just throw them in the chat and we will get to answering. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. Ghostface says, "I'm early. Let's go." You're not early, Ghostface, or late. You are here exactly when you are supposed to be. Spaceform says, "Do you believe that Botox Gnome is going to spend the rest of her life in a Minnesota state prison?" I think that depends entirely, Space Plum, on whether people like me and you do the work of making sure that people like Kristi Noem face accountability. It's going to be so easy for people in the Trump administration, including Trump, to skirt any sort of responsibility for the carnage and the chaos and their illegal behavior if we do not do the work. I just finished reading Injustice, which is basically a breakdown of how Trump and the Republican Party destroyed the Justice Department and how, the project of trying to hold them accountable was so massive and there were so many people within the Justice Department, like Trump's Supreme Court, that basically made it almost impossible. And while there were mistakes that were made, it is unclear whether or not, if those mistakes hadn't been made, if anything would have gone differently. And so we need to do the work. I don't care if you think that we are up by 5 points or down by 5 points. If you think we're up by 5 points, we should be up by 50 points. If you think we're down by 5 points, we need to be up by 100 points. So we got to get out there and do the work. Otherwise, nothing's going to get done. All right, Stevie Max, you're sitting at TikTok at 55 years old trying to be a TikTok star. I'm not trying to be a TikTok star. Also, I'm 46. Also, people tell me I look like I'm 35. So, I know exactly what you're doing here, and it is not telling the truth. Stevie Max says, "How did the destroy Justice Department? Watch this, everybody." It's a massive topic, Stevie, and I don't honestly think that you give a shit. I don't think you're here in good faith. But short version is Trump started weaponizing the Justice Department while he was president in his first term. He started branding judges as being Trump judges, Obama judges, Republican judges, Democratic judges. And while there is some bias in the judiciary, the same way that there's bias in every human being, the idea was supposed to be the independence of the judiciary, and Trump started whittling away at that. He installed over 300 judges, including those up to the Supreme Court, whose motivation was not in obeying the law or making sure that justice was served in America, but instead to fealty to the Republican Party, to their billionaire donors, to Donald Trump, and they are getting exactly what they paid for. Brutal B says, what do you think of Bivens Act 2025? I don't know anything about it. Joshua says, thank you for reminding me why I don't vote. I mean, I'm trying to make it so that you do vote, Joshua. Would you like to tell me why you think it's a good idea to not vote? Adrian says, Tim Walz has shown why weak leaders like him and KKK Kamala weren't elected. We need true left leaders. I don't agree with that at all, Adrian. I don't think that Tim Walz is a weak leader, and I think that calling Kamala KKK Kamala is a bit of a stretch considering that she's a woman of color. Okay, let's see here. Lauren, great to see you again. Stevie Mac says, only accountability when it's on the right. You don't give a shit when the left does your path. I don't know what that means, but again, Stevie Mac's not here in good faith, so I don't really give a shit what this dude says. Ghostface says, do you see the recent murder that an ICE agent did? I heard about it. I heard all about it, and unfortunately, I am not surprised. Like, I knew this was coming, and it's going to keep on happening until, there is enough pushback by the citizens in order for Trump and his party and his backers to feel like there is some consequence to what they are doing. Okay. DD says she meant KKK Caroline. Yeah, that's way more accurate. Poinsettia, just a mom, says, over Biden's term, I realized what a crock Dems are, but Trump is a fascist. They're all playing us. So I don't think that the Democratic Party is a crock, Poinsettia, and I don't think that they are all playing us. Like, I think there's a big difference between left-wing politicians and right-wing politicians. If you want me to go into more detail on that, let me know. PC says, when is armed resistance justified? So I'm sure that some people will tell you that there will be a point when we're going to need to take up arms. If you listen to the political scientist Erica Chenoweth, she will tell you that based on the data, nonviolent resistant movements tend to be way more productive and successful than movements that incorporate violence. I mean, look at the murder that ICE just did in Minnesota. His gun didn't protect him. It gave the right an excuse for why killing protesters is acceptable. And so, I don't think that we should be, dictating our movements and our actions based on what the right is going to say. But I do think that, I don't know, it didn't seem like it helped. Let's see here. Poinsettia says, dehumanizing people is what Smittler did. Cheering on Gestapo is what Nazis did. MAGA Nazis. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that, Poinsettia. CNDM says, do you think that soon there will be a war between China and the USA? We should really hope that there isn't. I don't think that there will be. I think that Trump is kind of a weenie where going up against nations that could potentially challenge us militarily is involved. Like, he's all about threatening Greenland and Venezuela because we have, unprecedented military superiority over them. But, looking at an actual armed conflict with China, that's a bit more of a coin toss, Sophia, great to see you again, says, what limits, if any, do you think should exist on asylum claims for immigration? I'm not, that's not my area of expertise, Sophia, but I do think that there should be some limits, like we should be able to verify whether or not the claim that they're making is accurate. Like, are they coming from a country that is embroiled in a civil war or is being run by the cartels? Is this person or their family's lives in danger? Can they no longer afford to eat? Is it famine? Is it drought? Like, what's going on? Obviously, some background check to make sure that this person isn't involved in any terrorist organizations or doesn't have any sort of lengthy, violent history of violent crime. But yeah, other than that, seems pretty good to me. Just let's let people come in. Immigrants are a net positive, as I keep on saying. PC says, how is ICE murdering American citizens different from what the Iranian regime is doing? I think that the Iranian regime, just in numbers, the Iranian regime, based on certain accounts, has killed over 1,000 people. Some people are saying it's in the tens of thousands, and I haven't seen any evidence that ICE has gotten up to those numbers yet. It's entirely possible that they have, but I don't think they're anywhere close. And also, we haven't seen any of that reporting. Adrian says the Democratic Party are as imperialist as Republicans. Obama started putting kids in cages. No, Adrian, that is inaccurate. So Obama was trying to operate within the laws that we had at the time and dealing with an unprecedented immigration crisis. And so, yeah, he did build detention facilities, but the intention was not to torture the people in the detention facilities. The intention was not to steal children away from their parents to de-incentivize them from crossing the border. It was an attempt to operate within the law in a way that was, just and humanitarian. Okay. So yeah, you can 100% miss me with that both sides nonsense. It is completely inaccurate. There are massive differences between the political parties. I can argue this 1,000 ways from Sundays. Sean Crown says, why can't Jack Smith prosecute Trump on the crimes he committed? Because he won the presidential election. And we have a standing norm which says that sitting presidents can't be indicted. And in fact, a Supreme Court decision as well that suggests that presidents are immune from legal accountability for their actions while they are president. So, with Trump being president and with the Supreme Court doing the work of protecting him, running cover for him, becomes very difficult for him to actually go to jail for the crimes that he committed. John Crow says, what? That's crazy. How does that make sense? I completely agree with you, but unfortunately, that's the world that we're living in right now. Brutal B says, that's why I'm talking about the Bivens Act 2025. I still don't know what that is. A says, there are definitely things I agree with on both sides. I mean, I don't understand. I don't see what you would agree with the Republican side on, but I'm happy to chat with you about it. PC says, doesn't Second Amendment suggest that we should proactively take up arms against ICE? I suppose so. I mean, we have the right to arm ourselves to protect ourselves, but there is some legal gray area as far as like how justified we are in using those firearms against ICE. Ivan Cisco says, can we vote on the Supreme Court judges, or are they only appointed by the president? They are only appointed by the president, but they are confirmed by the Senate. So who we vote into the Senate also can affect which person gets to be a Supreme Court justice. Brutal B says, it's a bill allowing citizens to sue federal agents, expanding capability of rights. On its face, that sounds good to me. I would want to look more into it. Okay, William Tell says, did you read the book All the President's Men? I didn't. I saw the movie. Is it the same? Rachel says, did Clinton put out a statement today? I did not see. Sophia says, but don't you think we may risk allowing in more people than we can afford if we are to lose with asylum claims? I'm not concerned about that at all, because again, immigrants are a net positive, so they contribute more to the economy than they take out. They contribute more in taxes than they take out. So, I don't really see what the negative is. Lieutenant says, I still can't believe they two unalived by ICE are pretty good. Yeah, I mean, it's a weird coincidence. All right, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments. Sean Gross, is there any way to change the things like term limits in the Supreme Court and presidential immunity? 100%. There are, Sean Crown, but it's a lot of work. Like right now, there are structural advantages for Republicans to win elections, and the Republicans are the ones that are keeping progress like that from happening. And so we need to do a lot of work in order to fight against all of the advantages the Republican Party is currently sitting on. But if we were to, do the work of electing more Republicans instead of Democrats, then, we could potentially have massive changes that benefit everybody in America. Raina says, what are your thoughts on the Confederate flag? It's the flag of a group of people who tried to secede from America. It's a traitor's flag. Depending on who you talk to, and this is an opinion that I tend to side with, I think that it's a dog whistle for blatant racism. I don't really understand why you would attach your culture or your history to that flag when it's a history of being a traitor to your country, losing a war, and advocating for a barbaric practice, the barbaric practice of slavery, and then the barbaric practice of racism and Jim Crow and shit like that. Carmine says, hear anything about the Dems voting to fund ICE? I don't know anything about them, but I did notice that there's a new propaganda narrative out there, which is they're saying that Democrats voted to increase or fund ICE when it's 7 out of, 7 voted for and 212 voted against. So, or I think it's a total of 212 Democrats, and so 200 and I don't remember the math, Anyways, Ilium says, "What do you think about Spanish politics?" I don't know anything about it. Colin Iser says, "Cuckold." Is that you? Are you saying you're a cuckold, my guy? Because I'm certainly not. Cal Hub says, "Should the U.S. have some form of direct democracy like the initiative or referendums that occur?" I think that in some instances it is worthwhile, but I don't know if we can do that for everything because it's just such collecting the votes of every 350 million people in the country. Obviously, not all those people are voting age, but the 250 million ish eligible voters in this country. It's massive and it's an expensive project. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I think that it can be useful in certain situations, but it really has to be used strategically and sporadically. All right, James Rush, St. Lucia, hello back. LOL says, "Who'd you vote for? Democrats up and down the ballot." Sudslinger says, "It's going to the Senate now." Okay, well, I don't believe that there will be any Democrats in the Senate who are going to be voting for it, and so hopefully it'll die there. Lauren says, "His name is Colonizer. I doubt he's here in good faith. Let me know if you want him booted, boss. You got it." Whose name was Colonizer? If it was that guy who called me a cuck, I already blocked him. Eric Likes Cheese says, "If the Abolish ICE movement becomes successful, what consequences should happen?" I think that we have seen both the Trump administration and ICE agents and everybody in between breaking laws. And so this isn't just about changing laws to make it so that ICE doesn't do the things that they do. It's about actually enforcing the laws that ICE and everybody up the chain have already broken. And so, we really should be seeing jail time for a lot of those people, and that's going to be a massive project. It's going to be huge. Okay, Colin Iser. Oh, got it. Did he say something? Colin Iser. Oh, yeah, I already blocked him, so we're good. Paul Jackson 300 says, "When will Americans realize they have a tyrant as president and they're on the verge of civil war?" I think a lot of Americans do realize that, Paul. Craig Miller says, "Jail for the Dems." If they break the law, yeah, but if you're talking about Dems in general, then no. Okay, Sophia says, "How would you define equality? Do you believe in equal opportunity or equal outcome?" That's a really good question, Sophia. Until we have more equality of outcome, then equality of opportunity doesn't really make that big of a difference. And here's my example for that, all right? You can say that we are going to, only judge people based on their resume, but it is way easier for certain people to get the kind of resume that makes it easy for them to get a certain kind of job. And so, you could have two identical candidates, one white and one black, just based on demographic statistics. We know that your average black person had to work a lot harder to get that exact same resume. And so, if we just put the marginalized communities in direct competition with, the majority communities, as it stands right now, the majority communities are going to continue to dominate in getting hired. And so we need to do a little bit more. We need to look for, is our equality of opportunity creating equality of outcome, or do we need to put our finger on the scale a little bit more? Michael O'Callaghan says, "Anyone ever told you that you're boring?" No one's ever told me that, but some people have told me that I'm boning your mom. Grace says, "May election Louisiana, March election Illinois. I am down with this Grace person advocating for people voting." Ito Toledano says, "Israel or Palestine? I am for the people of both of those countries. I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries." Daniel D says, "Are rejected wannabe cops applying for ICE jobs?" I don't know who is applying for ICE jobs. I've seen a little bit of reporting on it, but I don't know the statistical breakdown exactly. It basically, there's a podcast called What a Day. They interviewed a reporter who went to try to get hired by ICE, and so she has some interesting information to give about that if anybody is interested in that. Let's see here. Sean Crown says, are treason charges possible, likely, if Dems win the midterm? I would say that it's unlikely that we will see that because the Republican Party, Donald Trump, will still have control of the Justice Department. And so long as Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are in those key positions, then the kind of legal accountability that we can see for Republicans is scant. But there are things that Democrats will be able to do with that authority, and there are things that they'll be able to stop from happening with that authority. And both of those things are important, even if it's not everything that we want to happen. Okay, Peluchin says, do you think Trump should buy Greenland? No. Doug says, don't you wonder what motivates people to make snide comments about you? It doesn't really matter what the motivation is. I'm sure the core of it is, either being paid to do that shit or being pathetic. So I don't really care. Huey Freeman says, bro, is the Iran strike happening? I haven't seen any recent reporting about what's going on in Iran. Daniel D says, what could Democrats do if they flip the House and Senate on the midterms? I think impeaching Trump, number one, stopping bills from going forward, number two, stopping judges from getting sat, number three. Depending on what our majority is, we could go as far as removing Trump from office and passing our own legislation if we had a veto-proof majority in the Senate. Shork says, are you concerned about the new TikTok ownership? Yeah, but I was concerned about the previous ownership as well. My Saria says, why are Immigration Customs Enforcement doing away with American citizens? Because ICE doesn't really give a shit about American citizens. ICE is the personal Gestapo of Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. And so they are doing what Donald Trump and Stephen Miller want them to do, which is to cause chaos, to murder people, to ignore people's civil rights, to treat people barbarically if they have the gall to be a person of color or dare protest their illegal and barbaric actions. Reina says, an opinion on Sophia supporting the Confederate flag. I mean, Sophia has, political opinions that I consider toxic and odious. And so if she has the Confederate flag up in her videos or whatever, I don't condone that. And I think that's, kind of I think that's a demerit on her personally, but I also think that she's here in good faith asking questions, so she's more than welcome to stay and continue being a part of the discussion. Okay, what's up, Ecuadorian? Been a minute indeed. JP says, what's the hand doing below frame? I think that's only for your OnlyFeed stream. That's pretty funny. Okay, It's the Rocketeer says, sources saying that Alex Preddy's murder all but guarantees a government shutdown this week. Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. And, I'm leaning towards being for that. Where every government shutdown is concerned, it's very complicated. And so there's no one definitive good idea or bad idea as far as how to handle it. But I generally think that I think the only moral thing that Democrats can do is refuse to fund this government as it is currently behaving. That might not be the best thing strategically. Like, are we doing more damage to the resistance movement if we shut down the government? Or are we doing more damage to ICE and Trump if we shut down the government? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. Okay, Rachel says, what would a shutdown resolve? I think that it would make clear the stakes that we are dealing with, that this is not business as usual, this is not normal, this is not legal, that this is a fucking 5-alarm fire, roaring alarm system. Like, all of our alarms should be on DEFCON 1, like, shit's going on that is fucking bananas, and we need to do something about it immediately. This is an emergency. Our government is an emergency right now. We are in a constitutional crisis that the president is at the helm of. And so I think that's part of it. Mike Green says, it should show what side is dragging their feet. I don't really know what that means. Warzone Hunter says, our checks and balances have failed. They haven't failed. They were assassinated, Warzone Hunter. The Republican Party threw it in the garbage. They were working good, but then the American people saw fit to put people in charge of those checks and balances who do not want those checks and balances. And that was, a mistake by the American people, obviously. And all the work that I have done in politics for the last 15 years has been trying to convince people to not make that mistake, and I'm not sure how effective I've been or what I can do to be better going forward, but I certainly am fucking trying. Alfredo says, doesn't comparing ICE to the Gestapo erase the much more similar slave catching history in the U.S.? Oh, yeah. I suppose calling them, Trump's personal KKK is probably more accurate. I don't know. Just because an analogy is good does not mean it is the best or perfect. Muzz King, Shawnee Flytrap, Donald Hayes, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the live stream of the day. We are back, everybody. I was away for a week, but now I am back. And we're fucking operating with, our fucking foot on the gas. Big Raspberry says, what do you think about free healthcare and education like in Europe? I'm for it. Rich Abu says, why MAGA's people keep saying the United States are turning into socialism? It's probably most likely a misinformation campaign. It is also possibly it's ignorance, repeating things that other people have said that is inaccurate. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. D. Scott, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Warzone Hunter says, should we all go tax exempt? That's a tough one. I can't, because you could get into a lot of legal trouble if you do that specific form of protest. And so I cannot advocate for that because I cannot tell people, that it is worth it for them to go to jail for their political beliefs. It could be a potentially very successful protest if enough people did it, but I can't tell people to do that because that would be pretty illegal and you could get into a lot of trouble for that. Ecuadorian says, question, what is it going to take to get Kristi Noem out of office? She hates immigrants is how she was brought up. The thing that it's going to take for Kristi Noem to get out of office is we need to elect Democrats. We need to replace elected Republicans with elected Democrats. And we could get rid of Kristi Noem as early as 2027, January 5th or whatever, 2027. But Democrats would need to dominate both the House and the Senate. Like, we would need a ton of Senate seats. Ugh, excuse me. Okay, Book Hooker says, just outlaw Botox in America. Agent 47 says, America's shit show continues live. It certainly does. Isaac says, what do you think about the people that are marching down the street with full immunity? I am against ICE. Sophia's opinion on DEI being used for hiring. By the way, I don't support that flag. Okay, I'm glad to hear that, Sophia. I don't know where my other followers saw that you were. Okay, so DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion, meaning that we should be looking when we're hiring companies to make sure that the country looks demographically like America does. Because right now it is way easier for a underqualified, mediocre white dude to get hired than an overqualified, exceptional person of color or woman. And so I encourage any sort of program or attitude that tries to solve that problem. Okay, Hunger Liberaler says, do you prefer high taxes for high public service or low taxes for low public service? High taxes for high public service. Robert, thank you very much. I'm glad to be back. Average Joe, welcome back. What's your opinion on the statement that abolishing ICE should be the moderate position? I agree with that, Average Joe. But, and I have been called a fascist for saying this, I think that we need to not purity test and gatekeep voting against the Republican Party. And so if there are people out there who are against what ICE is doing, but think abolishing is too far, we cannot call those people fascists or morons or anything like that. Those people we need so many people doing so much work. We cannot say no to anybody who is willing to help us. We need to form coalitions with people that we don't necessarily agree with 100% of the time. And so if there's a person out there who's willing to vote against the Republican Party because they do not like what ICE is doing, but they are against abolishing ICE because border enforcement is still really important to them, we cannot afford to push those people away. We need them. We need every person. We need people. And it's not just about the current advantages that the Republican Party has, both being in full control of the government and having all the billionaire money and having captured all the electoral systems. It also has to do with the illegal things that they could potentially do going into 26 and 28. You know, who's to say that they're not going to try to seize ballots and voting machines? Who's to say that they're not going to close down roads to polling locations in Democratic areas? Who's to say that we're not going to see, you know, the military and ICE trying to intimidate voters outside of polling locations? So we need everybody. We need everybody that we can. We need everybody doing the work. We need to form a large coalition. Shawnee Flytrap and Leslie, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. And that means it's the best part of every day. Best part of every day. It is finger hearts o'clock. Okay, Thomas says, should we always have at least 3 political parties at a time, right, left, and middle? Until we have ranked choice voting, any other candidate besides the initial 2 would only serve to be spoiler candidates. Jerry 116 says, why do Democrats support criminals and terrorists and communists? They don't. And in fact, if you do not like politicians who support criminals and terrorists, then you should be voting against the Republican Party, because Donald Trump pardons a ton of criminals and terrorists, and potentially communists. You know, Sean Crown says, why is Trump trying to get the Minnesota voter rolls? They want to have an enemies list. They want to have all the data on us, so it's easier for them to silence and punish people that are speaking out against them or voting against them. Ranolph says, why is Donald Trump so good? So good at lying? So good at corruption? I'm not really sure what you are getting at, Ranolph. Yabo says, yo, I thought you were one of the Superman actors for a second. Stop it. You're going to make me blush. Younger Liberaler says, do you think Greenland should belong to the USA? No, I do not. Alfredo says, why are Dems still pushing lesser evils propaganda? It clearly hasn't worked and led to Trump. I don't know any Democrat that is pushing lesser evils propaganda. What I am saying is the Democratic Party is not the lesser of 2 evils. The Democratic Party is good but flawed. The Republican Party is doing shit that I think you could unequivocally call evil. You know, murdering people in cold blood who are just trying to help, and then going out there and lying about it and calling them domestic terrorists to rationalize it. That's evil shit. That is fucking evil. You are ruining people's lives. There are children who are going to grow up without their parents now because of shit like this. People who have done absolutely nothing wrong. You have just ruined their lives. The misery, the trauma, the PTSD that you are incurring, like, you're evil. That's some fucking evil shit. Democratic Party has made a lot of big mistakes in the past, but I don't think that they're even fucking close. If we're calling it the lesser of 2 evils, it's like, you know, saying that an ant is the smaller of 2 parties, where we're comparing an ant and a galaxy. Okay, Blackhawk says bullshit. I don't know what that means. Blackhawk says they didn't comply. I'm just going to go ahead and block you right away because I don't buy you for 1 second. Sophia says, what safeguards do you think should exist to stop regulatory agencies from exceeding congressional intent? That's a really in the weeds kind of, wonky policy question, Sophia. And so I'm gonna defer on that one. I don't really have anything in mind. I don't think that has been the main problem of regulatory agencies. I think the main problem has been Congress kneecapping regulatory agencies as opposed to regulatory agencies and experts going rogue. I don't think that you work for regulatory agencies like that unless you're passionate about the project of doing what that regulatory agency is doing. Okay, Alex says, why do you support the murder of ICE agents? I do not. I don't support violence of any kind. Siri says, politics are so jester. I don't know what that means. Will Thrill says, can Trump be free-pardon his cabinets, agency heads, and himself? Yes, I believe that he has the ability to, but I do not believe that is going to be the end of the conversation. Like, depending on how many seats Democrats win in upcoming elections, we can undo all of that. Ivan Cisco says, notice how ICE doesn't go to gang and high crime areas and prey on people that can't defend themselves. I think that's generally pretty accurate. Vegas Prius says, why do Iowa and middle-class conservatives vote against their best interests to own the libs? Propaganda, misinformation, culture wars, people write entire books about that. D. Scott says, wasn't that the crux of the Supreme Court's decision on agencies? The Supreme Court, I can't remember what the most recent thing was, D. Scott, but it basically reversed the Chevron doctrine, basically saying that we no longer defer to the experts in those agencies. We defer to judges who get to decide what the purview of those agencies are. So people that aren't experts are now going to get to tell the experts what their positions and positions and policies should be. Jerry 116 says, why was Tim Walz honored with a plaque from the Democratic worshippers of Satan? Jerry, that's what I call a bad faith question. Unlike when your mom asked to bone me, that was a good faith question. Okay, let's see here. Let's see here. May Saria says, why is ICE investigating fraud? Shouldn't it be a different government agency? Yeah, 100%. I didn't even hear about that. Okay, scrolling down to the bottom. Oh, what's over here? Ecuadorian Quito says, why doesn't our Chicago governor, J.B. Pritzker, invite foreign sports teams to play in the city just to get under Trump's skin? Yeah, I mean, there's like fun, attention-getting kind of protests, and then there's like more substantive change needs to happen right now kind of protests. And I think that when ICE is murdering people in cold blood and then lying about it and then trying to skirt all legal accountability for doing that shit, I don't know if this is the time for the cute stuff. I don't know if this is the time for Gavin Newsom's knee pads. I could be wrong about that. That's just the temperature that I'm checking, but that's not where I would go in this exact moment. George East 2002 says, why were there no Democrats defending autistics from Trump and RFK's rhetoric? I feel so let down. I feel like there are plenty of Democrats who are defending people with autism and other neurodivergent individuals. Georgie, if you want me to try to find some for you, I will, but I'm confident that it's happened. Magic Man says, Wall says ICE is Gestapo and operations are another Holocaust. Do you agree? So one of my regulars on the live stream, is a Jewish person who finds comparisons between the Holocaust and what Trump is currently doing offensive, because the Holocaust murdered millions and millions of Jewish people with the intent of exterminating them. And while I think that there are some extremely troubling parallels that we can see between the Gestapo and Germany during World War II, I do not think that we have any evidence that the murder campaign has reached levels where it can be compared to the Holocaust yet. And so where I generally, say, yes, ICE is Trump's personal Gestapo, and they are doing a lot of things that Hitler did in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, etc. To me, that seems clear and obvious, and my brain allows for the space to exist between they haven't done every single thing that the Nazis did, but that doesn't mean that we cannot compare them accurately to Nazis. Some people disagree with that. Some people think that just the scale of the death and destruction that the Nazis did during World War II means that it is inappropriate to call anything else the Holocaust or the Gestapo or the Nazis, etc. So, I guess it just depends. I think you can do both. I think you can say they are doing these things that the Nazis did, and that should be really concerning for everybody. I wouldn't put it past them to engage in some sort of ethnic cleansing, extermination campaign like happened during the Holocaust. ISMG2 says, do you have any events that might give me a win on a bet? No, I do not. Magic Man says, name them. Name who? Georgie says, that would be great, thanks. Yeah, send me a DM, Georgie, otherwise I'm going to forget. This is for everybody who's watching. You can hit me up if you have any requests for information or if you have any questions that I'm not able to get to on the live stream. DMs are open. You can email me through my website, and I have a Discord channel. Link is in the bio. And yeah, the only reason why I would not go out and figure that out for you and send it to you is if I forget. So if you send me a DM, then I am happy. Then that'll be like my own personal reminder to do that research. Magic Man, what is it that you wanted me to name? Sean Crown says, is Trump still shipping people to El Salvador? I don't know, actually. I haven't seen any recent reporting on that. I believe that there are still people in El Salvador that are there illegally and that we should get back. But I don't know where the deportations campaign is at this point. Brando says, is it okay to watch right-wing influencers even if I don't agree with them? I wouldn't, because part of what makes them popular and valuable is the fact that people watch them. And so I say don't give them a single click or eyeball that they have not earned. And they have not earned your eyeball or your click. Some people think that it's important to watch those people so that we know the arguments that they're making and the lies that they're telling so that we can counter them and be prepared for that. I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's productive. But I choose to do the other path. I choose to avoid and, just get my news from reputable sources instead. John Bradley says, do you think the government shutdown will fix ICE or immigration? I think it's unlikely that the government shutdown will fix ICE or immigration. Logistically, I don't know if shutting down ICE does more to hurt the regulators and the oversight, or if it hurts the Republican Party and ICE itself. Messaging wise, it's a fucking slam dunk. It's a fucking grand slam, because America does not like what ICE is doing. And so America does not want the Democratic Party to assist or let along to go along with whatever ICE is doing right now. So at the end of the day, I think our power is in the number of human beings that we get doing the work. And I think that we get more people doing the work if Democrats take this moral stand, even if it means we are logistically making things a little bit easier for ICE and Trump to get away with what they're getting away with. Okay, Fernando says, are you a liberal or a leftist? I think that somebody observing me in a lab might call me a leftist. I call myself a progressive Democrat. I support candidates like Mamdani and Chris Murphy and AOC and Bernie Sanders, so you probably would call me a leftist. All right, Bogos Binted says, do you believe that there is ever any reason to deport someone who is in our country illegally? Of course, Bogos. Absolutely, there are reasons to deport people who are in our country illegally. Absolutely, 100%. And the fact that you had to ask that question shows to me how effective right-wing billionaire propaganda has been in saying that the Democratic Party doesn't believe in deporting anybody. Not violent killers, not rapists, not murderers and terrorists. Yeah, it's a fucking straw man. And I'm not blaming you for asking, Bogos. I'm glad you asked. I'm blown away by how effective their propaganda has been. It's been going on for a long time. It's extremely well funded. It's sinister. Like, we don't even recognize that it's happening sometimes. But yeah, it is out there. It is extremely effective. Unfortunately. Corvo Bianco Nero says, I propose creating a federal agency called FIRE to check on ICE. That's pretty funny. And then WIND to check on fire, so it's, and then there can be Earth as well. Anyways. Georgie says, if they did a capital violent crime, it's totally valid to remove them, but not the everyday worker. Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think that there are some nuance that can be, debated in there, but generally I'm with you on that. Alex Hernandez says, is the moon made of cheese? I am new to politics. No, it is not. And welcome. Let me know if there's anything I can do to get you more informed and involved in politics. Coco says, ICE is acting like the Gestapo. My mother is a Holocaust survivor. The stories she told me are similar. Yeah, I completely agree. But again, I think that the compromise with people who find those comparisons offensive is to acknowledge where they have not met that bar yet. It's like, we have not seen, or at least we do not have evidence of millions and millions of executions being done in the name of Donald Trump and ICE and Stephen Miller. And so to that end, they are not similar, but there are a lot of other similarities that I think are extremely fair and important to point out. Misty Lane, great to see you as well as Gen. Corvo Bianco Nero says, and then the Fire Nation attacks. Yes, 100%. Bogo says, some people believe that deportation is not a just response to illegally entering a country. Yeah, but I believe that there is a idea of the brand of the Democratic Party is that we do not believe that deportation is appropriate in any situation, and that's just wildly inaccurate. Okay. Sophia says, but isn't someone being here illegally a crime itself, even if they didn't commit other crimes after? Absolutely, Sophia. And I think that we need to recognize both where we can give people some grace and wiggle room, and where giving them that grace and wiggle room is better for us. So if we have not been able to find somebody who is here illegally for 10 years, and then this person has become a pillar of their community, and they have children here who are citizens, and they're paying taxes and working and creating businesses and doing all the things that we want immigrants to be doing, I think that it would be dumb to just go by the letter of the law there, you know? And I think that when you look at democratic programs, what we're doing is trying to find those people who are a benefit to their communities and to the country, and making sure that they do not get deported on technicalities like that. Okay, Santino says, can I join the live? I want to ask questions. I'm going to say maybe, Santino. We are, you know, it's a pretty chill one today. We don't have a ton of questions and viewers today. So, yeah, but I'm mercurial about it. I let people on when I want and never before. Bush Baby says, is BRICS really a thing? If so, is it a threat to the U.S.? It is a real thing, and yes, it is a threat to the U.S. Lucky Rachel says, is Donald Trump ready to help us remove museum in Uganda, and we give him minerals in exchange? I don't know what that is, Lucky. So sorry about that. Okay. Digital Mika says, why not fix our broken immigration system? Why is that not the big question and fix? Well, the Democratic Party tried to do that, and the American people rewarded them by voting almost all of them out of office and giving all of the levers of powers to the Republican Party. So it doesn't really seem like the American people give a shit about fixing the broken immigration system, because the American people have been lied to about this issue and what the parties actually stand for and what they're doing for a really long time. And unfortunately, America believed them. Okay, the Fixer Mike, great to see you again, says solved crimes are what we call victimless. Some crimes are what we call victimless, and many crimes are avoided by rich people who just pay fines. That is accurate. Okay, Bogos Benton says, it seems like ICE are prioritizing illegals who have then committed additional crimes after renting illegally. I don't see any issues with that in principle. So that's what they're saying, Bogos, but that's critically not what they are doing. 90% of the people that they are arresting, deporting, detaining, murdering have done absolutely nothing wrong. And that should be really concerning for everybody. That they don't give a shit about going after the murderers and the rapists and the potential terrorists. They are just going after whoever the fuck they want. If you look brown, get in the car. You publish an op-ed about you don't like what Israel's doing to Palestine, fucking get in the car. You go on the internet and you talk about how you don't like the Trump administration and what ICE is doing, get in the car. You know that poem, first they came for the blanks, but I said nothing because I wasn't a blank. Then they came for the other blanks, and I said nothing because I wasn't one of those blanks also. Like, we're living in that poem right now. It's important that people recognize that. Breeley says, honestly, Sophia's lifestyle does not seem that conservative, so I'm just curious on why she supports Republican policies. Not hating, just curious. I know that Sophia is pretty dogmatic about being anti-abortion, and it seems like she gets her news from a lot of right-wing sources, and so I would say that her politics probably branch from that. All right, P. Rezival says the GOP does not want to fix the immigration system because it kills their campaign. That is accurate. Georgie says, do you think there will be legal consequences for the ICE agents trying to detain natives? There will be if we do the work of unelecting every single Republican. Like, again, Republicans being in the judiciary, Republicans being in the Department of Justice, Republicans being in Congress, Republicans being in the White House. That is what is keeping accountability from happening. Because Republicans view ICE agents as being on their team and therefore immune from any kind of legal accountability. So we need to do the work to make sure that there is legal accountability. It is up to us, now more than ever, it has been up to us. We cannot sit around and hope the Democratic Party can somehow ninja their way out of this, because they are in a position where they do not have the power and resources to do this by themselves. They need us. We need to do the work. Okay, Michelson says, what was the plan with Preddy bringing the gun? I guess protection. I don't really care. If he had it legally, I don't really need him to explain why he had the gun. You know, he wasn't breaking any laws. He had a gun. Kyle Rittenhouse had a gun, and he killed a bunch of people. And Republicans were fine with that. I don't understand why a guy legally having a gun that he was allowed to have in a holster was, what do you call it? Is, necessitates being murdered by ICE. Georgie says, I want people like RFK gone for what he said about my neurotype, but they can all go. Yeah, I want that too. Winning the White House in 2028 can get that done, but we're also going to need Congress if we want to stop RFK from doing more damage. Okay, let's see here. Hub, stop. Don't say mean things to other people in the chat, Hub. That's your warning. All right? I do not condone, and I have zero tolerance policy for bullies in my live stream. Maggie says, many people never leave home without their concealed carry weapon. I don't know how many people there are that do that, but I'm sure they exist. Caden Frost says, is it true that he wasn't carrying an ID? That who wasn't carrying an ID? Olivivid, great to see you again, says, why isn't the ICE agent being charged by Minnesota State? I don't know. There might be some jurisdictional issues there. It's possible that legal action is coming down the pike and just hasn't, happened yet. But yeah, I'm not really sure. Okay, let's see here. Lucky Rachel says, what is the meaning of being Democrats yet no one cares about Uganda when they are murdering us in Uganda? There are a lot of countries out there, and we can't be experts in all of them and what's going on in them. I have no idea what the politics of Uganda is going on there right now. And so if there's, murders or ethnic cleansing happening there, then obviously America should be doing what we can to help and to stop it. But I don't have any information on it, unfortunately. Okay, Period says, what's your issue with fascism? I'm a fascist. I guess my issue with fascism, generally speaking, is that it removes the power of the people to change the government. And it is a political ideology that forces people that don't agree with you to go along with you, even if you are in the minority. And so I guess, how would you feel if somebody with your exact opposite political beliefs was a fascist in charge of your country? Wouldn't that upset you? And if the answer is yes, then I don't think you're a fascist. I think you're a fascist for what you believe in, but I don't think you're a fascist generally. I think you just want the government to do what you want it to do. And you believe that fascism and dictatorship is the best way of doing that. And I think it's kind of a shitty philosophy, if I'm being honest. All right, Chris Cherry says, what do you want me to ask you? Whatever you like, Chris. Scipio African says, democracy always ends up controlled. Bad critique of fascism. I don't know what that means. I don't necessarily agree with that. Chris Cherry says, you're a front runner that always wants to be on the winning team. I'm a front runner that always wants to be on the winning team. I don't know what that means, Chris Cherry. Sophia says, how do you think we should balance compassion for offenders with accountability and public safety? I think that we need to focus more on being confident that people are committing the crimes that they are committing. I think we need to be more focused on public safety and less on revenge. There is this weird thing that happens with people where justice and the law is concerned, where they think that the people that did crimes need to suffer so much to make up for the crime that they did. And I understand that impulse, that emotional impulse to be like, that person did a murder, or that person hurt somebody that I care about, or that person stole from me my wife or my child or my husband or my parent or whatever. And so you want to get revenge, you want vengeance on that person. I don't think that's healthy for a society, though. And, if you look at if you look at recidivism in countries where we treat prisoners more humanely, it's better. I think we should also be looking at the root causes of crime, which, let's be real, a lot of this is poverty. A lot of this is a lack of opportunity, a lack of mental health care, a lack of education. You know, all shit that the Republican Party created. Oh, we are in a hole that the Republican Party created. And crime is a symptom of that, not the disease. Alrighty, John Abbott. You didn't miss shit, John Abbott. We are here, my guy. Okay. Scrolling around. Chris Cherry says, again, I know it doesn't make for good debate, but I am on your side. We've become all that we hate. Right now, I don't recognize my country. I'm on your side. We've become all that we hate. No, not you, the fascist that supports the fascist regime right now. Yes, Chris Cherry. Yeah, I just wasn't sure what that comment meant. Chris Cherry says, this was created by Democrats who just threw money and never provided real answers. I disagree with that, Chris Cherry. The Democratic Party has done a lot to help people and to create a country where people can, you know, pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And they've made mistakes, sure, but I find it very hyperbolic and inaccurate to say that the Democrats threw money at the problem and never provided any real answers. D. Bojanic says, what is your thought about transnational companies being called neo-colonist? Is that neo-colonist or neo-colonialist? It makes sense to me. I don't know. It's pretty heady to kind of get into that, but yeah, it kind of makes sense, I suppose. Scott Claris says, when people have little to lose, they become desperate, more likely to become criminals. That is 100% accurate. Chris Cherry says, then look at Biden's voting record when he was in Congress if you don't think that this was a problem. Yeah, no, I think that Joe Biden did some terrible voting. But I think that you'd also need to look at those votes in the context of the time that they were happening, you know? And so, like, the crime bill that everybody is so fucking pissed off about Joe Biden signing and calling it racist, like, that bill polled extremely well with the African American community at the time that it was being proposed. And so, you know, we can look back at it now and say, oh, this wasn't actually solving the problem. It was just throwing people of color in jail. You know, but at the time, everybody wanted that. And at the time, people like Joe Biden were called too far to the left and crazy leftists. Sam the Baller says, do you agree with Donald Trump increasing tariffs on European allies? No, I do not. Scipio says, opinion on authoritarianism. I'm against it. Lucky Rachel says, we have minerals, don't mind about the payments, but Uganda is seriously bleeding. I'm sorry to hear that, but again, I don't have any information about that. Chris Cherry says, don't give me that there were men that were willing to die on a hill for what they represented. Yeah, I mean, some people saw it for what it was, Chris, but I think literally, you know, most people did not see an issue with that bill. Algorithm says, I love Donald Trump. He will save the world. Is that a bit? Belgian Boxer says, where's Obama? I mean, he's a private citizen. He can do whatever he wants. And I don't know, you know, some people would argue that he should not be on the sidelines right now. Other people will argue that him being out there will be a bad idea. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I think there are things that Obama can do to meet the moment, and I hope that he's doing them. Greasy says, what's going on with Greenland? I have no idea. It seems like Trump has backed off, but sometimes he does that, and then he sends in the military and steals your president. Chris Cherry says, I never thought I'd want for the days of Obama and Bush. Yeah, for real, Chris. 100%. Okay. Ian says, how much power do you think the federal government should have compared to the states? I think it depends on what the issue is. Like, I think that we've seen how federalizing certain issues is better and leaving it to the states is better in other issues. Substantively, I think that gun control and pro-choice legislation is the sort of thing that should be federal, because right now you have, you know, people buying guns in states where they are illegal and then bringing them into states where they're illegal. You have states passing absolutely insane and barbaric abortion bans that are causing the deaths of women who are trying to have children. And so, like, that doesn't work, you know, but you can find me some states' policies. I'm sure that, like, water resource management is probably better handled by individual states than by the federal government. Okay, let's see here. Lauren says Obama was an excellent president. What do you mean? I mean, some people have very good faith criticisms of Obama and the things that he did. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. But, there are some good faith criticisms that you can make of Obama. MR says, I believe only Democrats should have mandatory abortion. So that's what we call not a good faith question. So you're out of here, Mr. Ivan says, what do you think of America having a national health service? I am for Medicare for all, socialized medicine, whatever you want to call it. Real Benda, great to see you again, says, is there a limit to how many innocent people getting killed by ICE before Congress steps in? I have no idea. I do not believe that Republicans in Congress have the ability to stop what Trump is doing. Not because they couldn't vote and actually use their power to actually stop them. I just don't believe that they want to, or they're too scared to. So I think that if you want to rein ICE in, you need to vote for Democrats, and you need to convince other people to vote for Democrats. And then you need to recruit more people to convince more people to vote for Democrats. That is the, long-term solution to this. We have to get rid of the politicians that are enabling this and condoning this and throwing fuel on the fire. And that's the Republican Party right now. Raina, I am warning you. That is the last straw, Raina. If you put any shit like that, not just about Sophia, but anybody else in my chat who is here in good faith, asking questions, not being a dick, then you're out of here, Raina. Okay. Ivan says, would you go for free healthcare where it's paid through taxes? 100%. Ian says, should governments intervene to correct misinformation, or does that risk authoritarianism? I do think that governments should be actively trying to make sure that their citizens are getting accurate information. Now, obviously, that can be weaponized by bad faith administrations like what Trump is currently doing. But what's the way that we make that not happen is by not voting for people that are going to do that sort of thing. So abusing your power to spread misinformation is one of those things that we should be worried about when we're thinking about who to vote for. Alrighty. All right, guys, we're at an hour. And so we are going to start wrapping things up. Average Joe says, do you think the acceptance of authoritarianism that we see by MAGA is a response to the perception of people not being held accountable for white-collar crimes, or simply based in prejudice? I think it's a bunch of things, Average Joe. Yeah, I don't really see the holding white-collar criminals accountable as being part of the calculus for people putting up with authoritarianism. I think they see it as like other problems. Like they see, we're getting kicked around by Europe. Let's have authoritarianism. We've got illegals in this country who are abusing the justice system to stay here so they can continue doing rapes and other crimes. Let's have authoritarianism solve that problem. There's Democrats out there killing babies. Let's have authoritarianism solve that problem. So, yeah, I think it's probably more like that. Alrighty. Let's see here. Teresa says, oh my God, it's dude perfect. Me? Am I a dude perfect? I don't know what that means. Roxanne says, one question, do you think the president should profit the way that he has been? No, I do not. And also the Constitution doesn't think that he should be able to do that either. Okay, Flong Sauce, do you ever watch the I Hip Lady? No, I do not. I do not know what that is. Thank you, everybody who has watched today and asked questions and sent gifts and shares and likes and stuff like that. I very, very much appreciate all the support that you guys give me, whether it is the paid kind or the freed kind. I have a stand-up special that is premiering this Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube. Link is in the bio. I will be watching live and in the chat if anybody has comments or questions while it's going on. I really hope that you guys will come and watch it when it premieres, because I believe that will really help in the algorithm. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I am back from my trip, and so we have no interruptions in our regular streaming schedule for the foreseeable future. If you have any questions that I was not able to get to on the live stream or something comes up later, do not be shy about reaching out to me. My DMs are open for a reason. You can email me through my website with this shit. You can hit me up on my Discord with this shit. I want to be a resource for you to be more informed and more involved in politics because we need people like you doing the work. So if I can do that for you, then use me. Use me until I am used up. Use me and abuse me. The Discord is great. There are great people there, and also there are great recommendations there for books and podcasts, and also recommendations for nonprofit organizations that you should 100% be donating your money and time to, because they need people just like you. And if you think there's something that you can't do anything to help, these organizations would beg to differ. They are desperate for you to send them an email or pick up the phone or write them a check. They need you to do the work right now. And so check out the Discord for all information on that. Special thanks to everybody who is a regular financial supporter of this show. We have got an updated list of all of my subscribers. Grimacus, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, Patrick, Dan Blackroyd, and the two Seans, Sean number 1 and Sean McGill. Thank you so much. If you would like to be one of these incredible people who also supports the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all suffering in a cost of living crisis, but the mechanisms are there should you decide to take advantage of them. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. Link is in the bio. I have a store that you can buy things from on my website. Link is in the bio. And you can send gifts and become subscribers on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. You can become a super fan on TikTok. You can become a subscriber on Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for free, and that helps me out a ton. Lindsay, Leslie, Triska, Sean, Crown, thank you so much for helping me reach my final gift goal of the day. All right, now time to look and see if we have any final questions that we're going to get to before we log off. And lastly, my heartfelt plea that everybody out there watching this does the work, because we need you to do the work now more than ever. Do the work and get other people to do the work. Raina, I want to get rid of you so badly, Raina. Like you're really skirting the line here. You're on thin ice, and I know that you're not actively bullying her, but we can all see through what you're doing with that question. So I'm just going to ask you to please be better going forward, all right? Let's see here. We have got... Let's do this while we are wrapping things up. Okay. Virlianti says, are there some cultures that are better suited for American laws and customs? German guy versus an Afghanistan guy. I don't think so. Everybody can live in America, regardless of what your culture is. Lauren says, I accidentally unsubbed and won't let me re-up until February 2nd. That's fine, Lauren. You know you can do no wrong in my eyes. Digital Micah says, tell me about the YouTube video again. Absolutely. I have a special coming out on this Saturday, January 31st, 10 a.m. Pacific time. It is on YouTube. It's called I'm Worried. It is a stand-up special that I produced. And, I'm excited for everybody to watch it. Link is in the bio. Lazavian says, can I guest request? You sure can. And as we're wrapping up, I'm going to say that me letting you on is a maybe, but not bad. Let's see here. Raina says, Sophia doesn't do an impression. Wasn't being mean by asking that. I was just curious because it gave me white supremacy vibes. I understand, Raina, but that question by itself would have been fine. It's just that you were doing other things that I thought were bullying. And so I want you to take it down a notch. Okay. Okay. Ruby's Colorful World says, hi, with the new guidelines here, will you still be here for long? That is an excellent question. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out as when they figure out what my politics are, how quickly they give me the boot. John Abbott says, you commonly say how Dems get no credit for the good that they do and reps don't get blamed for the bad that they do. The common explanation for the Republican side of that is we don't expect better from them. I think the best explanation for the Dem side is that a good governance is, by its nature, something you don't notice happening until it stops. Thoughts? I think that is 100% part of that, John Abbott. But I do think that there's a attention motive in the mainstream media that also falls into that, where we have this common understanding that the Republican Party is evil and up to no good and doing bad things. And so reporting on it doesn't become a story unless it's worse than the last bad thing that they did. Where Democrats are generally viewed of as the party of being responsible and trying to do good things. And so any little thing that they do that doesn't align with that is the story. So I think part of it has to do with that. I think part of it has to do with what you're talking about, where it's really easy to miss when the government is doing good things, but it's only the bad things that you see. That doesn't really explain why Republicans get away with it so much. You know, like they let 9/11 happen, and yet we still look at them as the party of being serious on national security. They are currently doing ICE shit, and yet we still trust them more for immigration enforcement. They let the last 3 financial crashes happen, and yet we still view the Republican Party as being the more fiscally responsible party. Like, make it make sense, except for the fact that it's billionaire propaganda and some sort of a attention motive via mainstream media. Like, you know, there's a lot going on there, and I do not believe that all of it is organic. I think that some of it is, you know, what do you call it? Rich people doing this shit on purpose. Lindsay says, will they ever answer for their crimes? Yes, but we have to do a lot of work in order to make that happen. Somebody says, do you hate Israeli people? No, I do not. I do not hate anybody. Sophia says, do you think reform is needed in law enforcement / the police system? Yes, Sophia, 100%. There are way too many people in law enforcement that do not have subtle ties to white supremacism and far-right extremist terrorist organizations. There are many who have intimate ties with those groups. And so, yeah, 100% we need to work on that. I think we also need to have different kinds of police. Like, why are the police being sent to deal with people who are having mental health episodes? They're not trained for that. So, yeah, there is 100% reform that needs to happen. Alfredo says, do you think Israel as a state should exist? I think there's 2 questions there, Alfredo. Was the creation of Israel a good thing or a bad thing? Could it have been done better? Is question number 1. And to that question, I say, I don't know. Question number 2 is, what should we do with the people that are currently living in Israel? And my answer to that is, we should let them stay there. But they have to be better neighbors to the people of Palestine. They are not allowed to kick people out of their homes and annex their territory and generally treat them like second-class citizens, like doing apartheid shit, you know, etc. Ready. Melissa says, what do you think the real reason is the Trump administration is wreaking havoc in Minnesota? I think that Minnesota is a state that has been generally run by Democrats and progressives, and we are seeing in Minnesota how well that can work. And so that is a threat to the Republican Party. I think it is a smaller city. Like, Minneapolis is not New York or Los Angeles, so the massive number of ICE agents that are in Minnesota right now can have much more of a dramatic effect on the population, you know, both visually and logistically. There are notable targets of the Trump administration in Minnesota, like Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar. There is a strong Somali population in Minnesota, and because they are, you know, people of color, they are a useful scapegoat for the Trump administration. Yeah, there's a bunch of things. There's a bunch of reasons. Okay. Reina says, views on feminism. I'm for it. Sorry about Junia, Reina. I want to make sure that my chat is a place where people are welcome. And we're not gonna do the toxic shit that they do in other online spaces. All right, wait, hold on a second. One last one. Dead Fish says, are you supportive of the United States of communism? I say it depends. The devil's in the details. I think that we should be doing more to incentivize companies being employee-owned, but I don't necessarily think that we should have government ownership of everything. But, you know, I am open to hearing your arguments for it. All right, everybody. Thank you again for being here. Please do the work. Please recruit other people to do the work. Be good to each other. Don't bully. Don't be mean. Don't scold. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. You know, my wife and I just had a great trip to the East Coast, and, you know, I was purposefully keeping an arm's distance from the news while I was seeing friends and spending quality time with my mom, and, you know, generally trying to take care of my wife, who's almost in her third trimester. So, yeah, but now we're back to work. And now it's Monday, and we are back to work. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great week, everybody. Have a great Monday. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye.